Okay, that should put me live. That should get the volume right. Looks like I'm there. Yep. Let's see if we can get this right today. Hello. Good morning. My apologies for the delay there. I've got to start trying to eat breakfast and make sure I eat something before I start the stream. Because otherwise I wait until the end of the stream, then I order breakfast, which is not really a smart choice. So, yeah. So, some housekeeping items to begin with. Obviously, I don't know if you noticed it, the sub badges I introduced yesterday, they are game controllers. I start with the Nintendo, the original Nintendo, and go up, and the 5-year one is a Dreamcast controller because it is one of my favorite consoles. It's one of the ones I have the fondest memories of. But I thought that would be a little bit of fun, adding a little bit to the stream a little bit. I do have some other pieces I want to put in place. I think it's useful to have overlays of some form. I do have an idea on how to do something more interactive with the bot, pardon me. Such as I have an idea of basically making an interactive not to-do list, kind of like an interactive board, where you can use a command in chat and queue a work item, and it won't necessarily go into this right this second, but temporarily it'll kind of show cards on the screen, and you can recall cards, etc. But very much leaning into the whole project management thing. So I do have some ideas there to introduce some level of interactivity and fun with the stream as we go forward. Those will be good distraction projects. And yeah, I very much want to, I've got a bit of a momentum here, right? Streaming feels good. The timing feels good. Am I streaming for as long as I would probably want? No, I probably could go happily for another hour and a half each day. That would be kind of my sweet spot. Although I think that I could risk getting burned out and having nothing to do with that. But yeah, I think that the stream is really feeling good right now, and I'm feeling productive. I'm not overanalyzing. I'm not trying to worry about what other streamers are doing necessarily, other than trying to make sure that I offer the best experience possible for those actually bothering to turn up every day and come and listen to what I've got to say and, interact. And that's what I kind of hope to do is to build a community that is interactive, that is able to share content. I mean, the amount of videos and articles to go through is just astounding, and it's just fantastic because it's just somebody else's view of how to go and look at software development, and yeah, it's great to be able to consume that. And I am trying. I do have a backlog. I've got things queued up. That's the Twitch docs. We don't want them. I've got things queued up to look at all across my screen. I don't close the tabs, and it's just lots to take in. So I appreciate the support. I appreciate the people turning up every day. It is very much appreciated, and I hope to continue this trend. So with that said, moving forward. So yesterday we obviously worked on switching out Couchbase, which is not something I wanted to do, but it's something I thought was necessary to keep the project moving forward. And in reality, that's exactly the sort of decision you have to make, right? If you go to your management and say, hey, we want to use this cool technology because we think it'd be really cool and appropriate, right? And you get to a point where it's kind of cool, but you're struggling with it. A lot of these tools are built and they're kind of open source and stuff, and it's great. But you need either time to get expertise in them, or you need consultancy, and it's kind of where a lot of these companies make a lot of money, is the actual consultancy sales after the fact, right? So you get a team that's going to engage the software. They go, they check out the enterprise, the community version. They start building their software around it, and then they need support. But then they need to know how to do it right. They need to know how to optimize it. They need to learn all these things, and they've brought a whole load of technology into them that is now a burden financially for any company. And I'm not criticizing. I'm saying that's the common style, right? We build on top of SQL Server. SQL Server is not cheap. A SQL Server standard license is something like $50,000 in production environment, so it's not something to sniff at, right? So even though I'm building my app on SQL Server, I might not be able to, right? Going to cloud is obviously the better option there, because then I can pay on a monthly basis for that. If you know, but I've got to make sure that this application is ready to make money before it even goes out the door, and I've got to kind of plan what that money looks like, because if I take on one user and they're generating 100 tickets a month and it's creating storage cost, what does that cost me, right? What does it mean to have those SQL servers up and running? And if I expand that and I use Couchbase for certain technologies and I use Mongo for certain technologies, I've got Kafka, I've got, let's say I get RabbitMQ or a mass transit in there. All these technologies kind of pile up, and the more I add, the more I've got to consider, okay, can I afford to put this application onto a server to see if it's going to take off, right? And how much of a cost do I have to chew before, right? So it's not just about using a technology because it's cool. I will use technology because they're cool, but it's more of a, okay, well, if I'm on one technology, I've got one cost, maybe expand it a little bit because I'm using more of it, but you know, maybe it's a little bit more reasonable. So it's not a bad choice to make at this point to use SQL Server here. I am going to put that back to Couchbase, I believe. I think it does fit for what the purpose is, but I just need to get some clarification on the APIs, make sure that I understand how to use Couchbase before I go and put that back in. Postgre is a good database. Yeah. And again, it's Postgre is another one of those platforms it's a, like MySQL, right? They're both decent databases that are free, but the hosting and storage costs of those are not free. And you know, so they're SQL level, so you can use them, and they're a little bit less expensive than Microsoft SQL Server, obviously. But you do have to be aware that if you're going to put them into a production environment, nothing's free, right? And if I mix Postgre and MySQL and SQL Server, I've also got to be careful of those sorts of things, because then I've got to plan, how do I do deployments properly? What are the differences in the SQL, right? Can I do that, right? So maybe this is a situation where I actually do use Postgre and I swap out SQL Server, right? Now, because it's all SQL standard, right? SQL 92, whatever it's called, T-SQL. Most of it would, in theory, work perfectly fine. There should be very little difference swapping out Postgre than having SQL Server in there. And the tools we're looking at the last couple of days, the whole event sourcing stuff, and even Jeremy Miller's CritterStack, right? All those use Postgre. That's their primary backing databases when they're using databases. So for Jeremy Miller, it's actually the event store is all in Postgre, I believe. So it's an option. Postgre is definitely an option. It's not actually something I've actually used a lot of, because I've basically been a Microsoft developer most of my career. SQL Server's kind of been my go-to, right? When I've used PHP, I've used MySQL. When I've used .NET, I've used SQL Server. Yeah, it's only because there's years of SQL Server out there that was fully paid for, that there's even enough content out there to make sure that it's easy to get into now, right? Microsoft have done the right thing. They've taken a product that was a solid product for years and built upon, and there was plenty of information out there. And then they've said, hey, you can actually access this for free now and use it in your development environments. But the moment you get to production, those costs are going to climb, because it's like, if I remember correctly, like one CPU for SQL Server Standard is like $30,000. For SQL Server Enterprise, it's like $50,000, and then it just climbs based upon the number of servers you're going to have. So it is not cheap if you're buying the actual license for a server rather than actually doing the cloud-based, which is, again, those costs are a little bit hard to measure. And I think that is where you putting metrics and open telemetry and stuff in the application sooner to get an idea of usage would be able to align usage to cost, right? So being able to visually see, here's the amount of usage to here's the amount of cost, you can actually figure out pretty quickly, here's what a user is going to roughly cost me per month, and figure out your licensing fees based on that if you do it right. Hit that number, triple it, there we go. There's the per month licensing fee, and that's got some padding in it, right? So what am I going to do today? This is not just chatting, I suppose. as I lose viewers. Awesome. So I'm going to get this SQL Server branch merged in. We can get this done, and then we're going to get the next piece working. I've obviously stashed the Couchbase piece for right now. Again, not lost to time, just lost to sorry. Hopefully the noise gate did a good job there. So what I completed yesterday was I actually got a ticket in. I got a tenant user. I got tenant information. Okay. So again, all I did was swap out those pieces, run the unit tests. I made no further code changes off stream other than some DI complaints. Basically, in my worker service here, I'd set things as scoped. And scoped doesn't work inside of a service. It works inside of a web system because it's scoped requests, right, per request. But I have to move these over. So we'll review that again as it comes up. But basically, I added the factory. I was missing a connection. So I suppose there was a little bit of extra code, but nothing that was actually code based. Everything else was working. So all the stuff we made, all the changes we made here, all the unit tests that should run unit tests. I believe they pass. No, they do not. You're a liar. You're a liar. Why'd you lie? I haven't tested this piece yet, so let's make sure. I think today might actually be a good day to start introducing the Git triggers for unit tests, because then I can know that this branch failed, right? So actually, let's start with that. Let's make sure we back up the process a little bit. We know there's a good failure, right? So that's okay. Yep, this is queued up. That's okay. That's okay. So I like DuckDuckGo in general. It's very good at keeping track of things, but it does not deal well with being with the computer sleeping, and tabs after a while just stop working. So you have to close it and reopen it. It does a good job of remembering where it was. I've got to be careful though, because when I click on a tab now, it'll try and open the tab. So let's go to here, and I want to borrow something from here, right? I want to do this. I want to take a job that will check out the code, build it, and then run the unit tests. I want to just verify what this is, right? So workflows, GitHub Actions, build and run unit tests on push of feature branch. So if it's a feature branch, i.e. one I could merge, on workflow dispatch schedule, no, I don't want to run it routinely. On push, workflow dispatch runs on. That's close, I think. On push. Okay, so something like that might work. We just got to kind of figure out how to narrow it to a branch. So let's go over here. Oh yeah, reminds me at work. Hi, Canny. Well, I mean, unfortunately, I'm not a game dev streamer. Wow, I lost a follower in that as well. Ouch. Ouch. um, I go to something like this and lose a follower, and then yeah. So, you know, as much as I would love to do game dev stuff would be me struggling and jumping through lots of struggles because it's not my forte. What I do know how to do is write software, and I do know. Oh, I gotta get rid of that. It's my passion, right? It is what I love doing. It is. It is what I want to share, right? So yeah, unfortunately I do work stuff, but it is something that other developers, and you know, I've had a look around. I've seen some developers recently, and on Twitch, and I've seen a variety of code quality, a variety of practices. I've seen a lot of just throwing code in there. And you know, that's what I want to kind of help with, right? Look, you don't have to just throw code in. Right? You can develop good code and still get stuff done. Well, that's all about what I do, struggling a lot with game dev and finally find a solution. I don't know, you're a smart person. I've watched your stream enough and seen all the cool stuff you do. Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of stuff that as some developers get put into a position where they're working on something, but they're not actually doing this stuff. Yeah, yeah. So how to build these pieces and do them pragmatically is kind of my approach. So let's so I don't have workflows in this project yet. So let's go to open in Explorer. I'm just scared of GitHub Actions did it the last 1.5 years on work time. Hey, maybe you can help me then. So GitHub Actions. So in the Kafka extensions library, we use the workflow to do releases, right? So I publish the NuGet packages to NuGet from this. So I run the build. There's no tests in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this chunk and create a workflow in the main project, in my project, Liquid Sky, which is my actual application stack, and create a run unit tests on feature branch is what I want to do. So I'm going to add it into the feature branch first because that's where I'm currently working. Show more options, open with code. Yes, I'd post the authors. I kind of know them. So in the same vein, I need to do, what was that folder structure? You'd think I'd remember it by now. So it's .github, so new folder, .github. And then in there, I need workflows, new folder, workflows. And then in here, a new file, and this would be, it's not release, CI.yaml. Yeah, update. So essentially I want to do this, right? Where I want to say, okay, check out the code and run the tests. GitHub Actions plugin. I knew Visual Studio Code was useful for some things. No, you're not signing into GitHub, actually. Not on stream. I'm not doing that. I'm not messing around with that. So I assume I need something like this, right? No. I'm not cross build. I'm just on push. So I need to know what that is. So this is going to be run unit tests. So when I push to this branch, or when I push any feature branch, I'm going to install it in a feature branch because that's the one I'm working with currently. But ultimately that will go into main. I want a kind of CI process to run and run unit tests. My restrictions. I have linking description. Linking. You should be able to whisper me, I believe. On push branches. Okay. On push branches. Main. Can I do now feature slash? Can I do that? Is any feature branches, any development, any development branch, any feature branch should be done. Star, okay. And in quotes, these need to be like that. They all need to be like that, or just that one? Because I'm quotes and answer. Okay, thanks. Okay. So let's add that. Conversion files, add CI workflow file, commit and push. Gotcha. Okay, so if we go back here, I really need to pin my actual. I can't pin it because it's not a public repo. It's my whatever. I can't pin my own projects on my own front page. So if I go to actions, oh, there we go. Nice. This should fail. I'm deliberately looking for it to fail because I just realized my unit test failed. So this should fail to build. It should be a big fat red because all the updates failed. Ooh. That ain't right. There's errors in the build there. So, hold on. I mean, there's warnings that are going to trigger some people. That's just complaining about that. These are the ones that are failing anyway, so. Normally I want to stream stuff currently, but I fight for 2 days with math problems and I'm scared to bore the pupils with it. Gotcha. Yeah, I can see that. It's hard as well if you're streaming and you are you may be behind an ad, I don't know. But yeah, streaming when you're doing something that might be a little bit boring is a little harder for certain. So let's address why the I kind of want to address why they fail, but I don't want to. Is that because the CI file has an incorrect? Oh, close it down. Don't save. Ubuntu latest checkout setup.net. I'm just going to wait for those ads because I'm obviously Canny's helping with. Okay, you should be back. Okay, so this is failing. Thank you. Sorry, Kenny. I did wait up. I didn't carry on talking. So this is failing, but it's not failing locally. Obviously, I have warnings. I'm not panicked about the warnings right now. I can clean them up afterwards. Authorization options could not be found. Service collection extensions and extensions identity. Extensions identity. Authorization options could not be found. So let's have a look. So these are my extension kind of libraries in here. Using Microsoft ASP.NET Core. .NET 8 class library. Nothing wrong with that. Why don't you... Liquid Sky source extensions, service collection extensions, error. Type on namespace could not be found. Runs on... Yeah, but that shouldn't... What? That's not an answer. That suggests that the GitHub Actions template for the .NET package is not. Let's have a look at. So in Kafka extensions, workflows release. The Ubuntu latest is fine. Yeah, I don't do anything else to check it out. I just build it. Obviously, this is building on the main project, but for those joining, this is worth doing right now because I have a failing test, and having this in place would have made sure that I knew exactly where I was starting the stream. So it's worthwhile doing this bit of administration. but this should not happen. Yellow, okay, that's for me to fix. I need to go through and sort, and those are all non-nullable warnings, right? They're non-initialized variables that need to be cleaned up. They can be gone through quickly. Just stick warnings as errors on for a little while. But this is throwing an error in two places. Could not resolve this reference, could not locate the assembly, Microsoft extensions, dependency, additional abstractions. Check to make sure the assembly exists on disk. If this reference is required by your own code, you may get compilation errors. Could not locate the assembly. Okay. GitHub Actions. I don't think I'm going to find this necessarily. Oh, hold on. .NET 8, let's have a look at the packages. So this doesn't have, no, that shouldn't, those are built. I want to, let's remove these items. This should error. Right. Manage NuGet packages, Microsoft ASP.NET Core authorization. There we go. That's why, because they're referencing local checkouts of those libraries, so it builds fine on my machine, and it would have built fine on anybody's machine that has .NET 8 installed. But because that was a NuGet package, that was an Ubuntu host, my bet is this will fix the problem. And we can put .NET dependency instructions in there. So I need to make sure that my libraries have explicit package references to the things they need to reference. I do not need them using local versions. I found out what the problem is, but have no solution for it. One step to the solution. Find out what the problem is. I mean, you know the problem. That is a step forward. Right? Using system. Oh, that's impressive. No, that's not. That's system.collections using. Oh, let's put that back again. Edit implicit usings. I've got the NuGet packages there now anyway. Just need to make sure that. There you go. Okay. I have a love-hate relationship to Kafka. Worked in companies where I was using Kafka, but they shouldn't have had an. They had not enough data that would justify such a monster. What does your extension do? Okay, so the extension library is just a wrapper around getting Kafka included, right? So in my actual code where I'm using Kafka right now, I am publishing tenant created and tenant user created, right? Then I'm consuming in work items right this second. And my extensions just kind of add nice fluent configuration of Kafka. So the newer version looks a bit different. You say add Kafka and do whatever else, and I've got outbots and stuff in there. But there's some. It's just mainly the extensions to kind of configure Kafka from the setup perspective, and then you get in the actual code you get an iEvent publisher. So here, there's not much to the Kafka configuration there right this second, but in the actual code. Oh, icon didn't load properly. Kafka does seem very heavy to me. Heavy in what respect? Good morning, by the way. It could just be a knowledge barrier. Kafka's pretty much, I mean, and this is part of the problem with Kafka, right? Is it can be anything it needs to be, right? Whereas some technologies like Mass Transit, RabbitMQ, and Service Bus, those message bus style technologies, they are very much command and event, right? Kafka is, here's some data. What you infer from it is actually, or how you use it, how you publish the data is not really our problem. For example, I used to think there's a lot to Docker. Now that I understand Docker, I don't think that. I mean, there's a lot to Docker, but again, your comfort level increases as you use it more. And that's kind of why, the Couchbase thing, right? Yeah. So Kafka, I like because of that kind of. It's the, hey, there's some data, right? I don't need to know about the consumers right now. I just need to know about there's some data. It's available. Whereas with things like event buses or message buses, you kind of have to know who's consuming the data before you send the command, right? You have to build both parts. And if that message goes and no one's there to listen, it can kind of get lost, right? So you can't just create an application that's publishing messages and then turn on the one that's going to consume it. Yes, they are stored. I know that they're not completely lost, but if you don't register that, especially in Service Bus, I don't know how it is now, but in Service Bus, if you didn't turn on the consumer of an event before you publish the event, you never got it. So there was definite challenges there. Was Kafka just fits with, here's some data, right? Oh yeah. So my last place, they tried hosting Kafka, and like, why are we not using Confluent Cloud? It's not costly in relative. They maintain it, they scale it, they do all of that, and it just works. And there's a lot of stuff in there. And they obviously, if you're paying them enough, they offer you training. So it was like, for a company, it was costing a lot. It was costing like $1,500 a month, but they were putting through 20, 30, 40,000 messages and climbing, right? So it wasn't wasted for the business opportunities it exposed. So for me, Kafka is useful in so much as if I'm publishing data and I need other things to listen about that data, then everything costs, right? And you don't want reckless spending. I get that, right? I mean, I was kind of talking about that at the beginning of the stream in terms of, if I go and use Couchbase here and I use SQL Server here and I use Postgre there and I use I use Mongo, etc., and I decide to put this out in the cloud as a platform, I got to make some money quick, right? And how do I do that? So that's where things like the metrics and things like that will come into play, where I can figure out what's the usage to the cost, and now does it work? I hosted from my previous company. I hate it because upgrading the brokers hold them alive, tracking the throughput, track that, you have your storage, etc. Wouldn't do it again. I mean, if you're doing the maintenance of it, and especially if you're not getting you're not putting, yeah. So for me, I'm going to continue using Kafka. It is an effective way of communicating data across my systems. This system design is in no way set in stone, and it's kind of my approach here, right? I'm not going to limit myself to I don't use these other pieces right now, so they're not really going to complain. Validation might. Yeah. Okay, so fixed some dependencies to NuGet packages. So that's right. Well, these two ones do. I see accountants that didn't get it. I regret bringing up accountants. We've also the compliance stuff with GDPR, especially when you live in Europe. You can't just use a hosted server from the US here. I mean, even the US, because if a US company works with European companies, GDPR can affect them, and it should be a concern, right? That's going to be something we're going to have to do a pass on of this, even because what I'm trying to do is minimize the amount of personal data stored, right? So when you register your user, you will have a name and an email, and it's stored in one table right now. It produces that name to other systems based upon that GUID, but does not have any, there's no email attached to it. But being able to publish an event that says, okay, purge a user, and every system that has any user data has the responsibility to remove that user and do whatever it needs to correct its data, would probably be a wise choice. You know, I just realized I've sat here for a while and not paid too much attention to the puppies because they've been kind of quiet. Looks like they're sleeping. So we are being lucky today. Yesterday I lost part of my sofa, part of my floor. There's only going out working as it than it used to be 2-3. I wish I didn't burn all my vacation. It's gonna be hard to get going at work today. It's right before a holiday. If companies expect super productivity at this point in the year, then they're doing it wrong. Personally, I think as a a company should go into kind of a hibernation mode around this time of year. It should basically be, hey, answer a call if you receive it, but there's no expectation of actual work. Like, no productivity needs to be made, just availability. Summary, if you have personal data, you have to store it in the EU. You should never leave the EU. Yeah. Compliance there is kind of a hard one. Okay, so let's see if this runs now. So go back here. Okay. Why did you succeed? You shouldn't succeed. You should have failed. Talk could spell that out, but it's a good point. Especially in dev, motivation is everything, I find. Yeah. Yeah, motivation will have till first weekend January vacation, but work more than when I actually work. Yeah. Okay, so our unit tests did not run. Make sure that test discover. Okay, so what does my test structure look like? Actually, that's a good point. Tests are often test folders. So let's go back to that workflow file. .NET test release. Let's see if we can get it to run from local. So anyone joining us, what I'm doing right now is I'm just doing a bit of work while I have the chance to identify an actual failing set of tests to make sure that any future pushes do a build on a feature branch and verify that tests run automatically so that I don't have a situation where I can miss them. That's going to bug me now because they're front and center. TBD, you've done a fair amount of PR reviews. I feel so. The PR review where I am doesn't get a lot of confidence out of the unit tests. Okay. Are your unit tests kind of standard? I thought maybe acceptance tests would be more helpful for him to see the behavior of the app hasn't changed. And that would instill confidence. So you actually have a dedicated PR reviewer as well. So in most areas I've worked, sorry, the map is moving out from underneath me, which is why I'm shuffling about so much. The developers themselves are kind of the reviewers because they've actually sat down and talked through what needs to be done. It does mean that large PRs are unpopular because they take up a significant amount of time of developer time. So I think in that case, yeah, acceptance tests may help alleviate some of the fears. Unit tests should validate the behavior as is outlined by the story, right? So you should be able to take a story, look at what it's doing, and look at the unit tests and line them up. Right, so the unit test should agree with what the story outline says, roughly, right? And that's why, things like where I've put in an assumption, saying you need to capture them in the story. Yeah, you do, because something like a sleep or a timeout or some sort of rule, arbitrary rule you're adding. So yesterday when I was doing the SQL Server table, right? Oh, that's bad. Thought I'd jet that. We'll come back around that one. The problem is there's too many unit tests for him to cover to quickly see what the behavior is. If I TDD, I'm usually battling well over 95% coverage, generally it's nearly 100. 100% coverage is pretty difficult to achieve. You unit testing queries? 100% is pretty high. 100% of all relevant code. Or is this too many unit tests to? I mean, the PR should involve what's changed, right? So the tests that are showing it as changed should be the focus of the initial pass, right? If that developer is checking that code out, then running all the unit tests, again, CI process, right, should run all the unit tests. They should know before they even do a PR that the unit tests have run and have all come back green, right? So reviewing the actual unit test requirements and identifying any missed cases would be the first pass. I don't see why. I mean, acceptance tests would be an extra level of work to review and could create just more confusion if they're not actually looking at what's happening in the unit tests. The unit test should take care that changes to the code later on doesn't break the main business logic, in my opinion. So for the current state, it's useless because you'll have to test it during development anyway. I get my coverage in my code mostly through integration tests instead of unit tests. But integration tests are a lot harder to build. If you get the framework from the beginning, then it's a little easier. But integration tests, again, is something I'm not focused on because it's just not something I am in the place to start building. I think the dev is the customer of the unit test, not the PR reviews for anyone else. Like if I'm coding an API, once I've done everything, I might not run the API and check request responses. I could easily make that phase automatic. Yeah, I mean, that might improve things. I think the dev is the customer of the unit test. The dev is the producer of the unit tests. The unit test should outline your requirements, right? So your unit tests should be able to be checked off again. So again, it's kind of why I write them the way I write them, right? So my unit tests are written as when deleting a ticket and the ticket does not exist, the result is not found, right? You can't find the result, right? When the ticket exists, the ticket is deleted, right? I'm outlining what has been done when this event has happened, right? When ticket is added and it is assigned, the user assigned is set, the ticket has a review date, the ticket is added, the ticket has a customer name, and the ticket has a description, and the ticket was saved, right? These are requirements that people would expect to see. We tried a while that 2 devs work on one issue. One is writing the tests afterwards, another dev takes care of the implementation. So you're not doing unit tests, you're not doing test-driven development, you're writing the tests. Oh, whoa, you're writing tests and the other dev writes the implementation. That's a... No. Like I don't have any objection to collaborative development, and on certain stories I think it's necessary. If it's a story that involves a lot of business logic, I think that 2 developers should work together and pair on it. They should do the whole swap out thing, right? Where they're going through, they're writing the test together, they're writing the code together, they're keeping each other honest on such things as, oh, you're trying to write the logic there, you're trying to jump ahead, we don't need to do that, we need to test this, right? Preparing, not equal coding at the same time. No, one codes, one watches, and you swap out, and it's like, hey, my turn at the keyboard, and it's the responsibility of the dev to make sure. Don't know why we did that for a while. It was fun to do because you don't think about the implementation when you write the tests, and the way you don't write your test implementation. I'd debate that somewhat. You don't think of the implementation when you're writing the test. You have to think about what you're going to do. There's no way you don't have any idea of what you're going to implement. Talking of implementing, I'm not doing very good at this today. You have interfaces. Yeah, but you still know. I think that takes a great deal of discipline. And if you even make an assumption, that's what I was going to do. I was going to do it over here, right? CD CDD dev CD prototypes. I think. Liquid Sky is under prototypes. Project next. CD Liquid Sky. Also, there was some stuff subtle wrong about your test there, TV. I'm wrong in... You're like sort of right. Yeah, kind of. It was clear, kind of not doing TDD. There's some stuff sort of wrong about your test there. Go ahead. Line 36. Ticket as review date. Because I've set a review date. Because that's the expected value. I've set it there. And this is populated because when I actually do call, when this happens, I say, hey, capture this as a result. So the right way to do this, by the way, and I've kind of yet to get into this pattern, there's a suggestion that what you do is you do, right? You do something like that. That's the when do thing. I don't know that. So this is end substitute. So this is actually the mock. So this is my subject. My system under test is still my support ticket handler, right? And I'm just saying, hey, when this happens on the mock, capture the result that we passed in, right? And that result will be what I'm actually verifying. And yes, it's in the arrange, but it is in the arrange. It's kind of part of setting up the actual test. The actual act is handling the There are several things you don't like here. Okay. That's perfectly fine. I have seen plenty of code that looks like this. And I don't like that either. Because my actual assertion is merged in with all the setup and everything like that. So that's why I do it that way. And the arrange and act is just because then it mentally follows the right pattern, right? Nope. Right, but again, the way I'm building the unit test is I'm testing a subject. So the actual assertions matter more to me. If I have to do the arrange in every single test, then I'm going to have a potential where the test is different between two facts in the same unit test file. This way, the actual act is repeated every time, and the assertion is based upon that action. So if it changes, if something is different, then I have a different test, right? So that's just the way I build these things. It's still achieving the unit testing thing, right? It's just not the way that most people would do it. And this is a blend of the way Mr. Anhorn does some things and the way I've kind of evolved to do these things. Is just this works for me mentally as a model. And I don't like the arranging here because you start putting arrange into the test, the assertions kind of, each file is its own test, right? So if you look at the way I write them, right? When ticket is added and is assigned, when ticket is added and not assigned, right? These are the different things that happen. So if there's different things that can happen, if the ticket is added and it's meant to be, its a review date is set a year from now, I would have an explicit test for that if there's an event that can happen that way, because I would, again, read what I'm meant to be doing. So these are the things that I can read back and say, these scenarios happen, right? Each set of tests would at maximum do the zombies thing then. Yeah, there's just, this is a little bit repetitive because I'm testing the field of an object. I could test this all in one fact if I wanted to, but this is more explicit, right? This thing happened. This thing happened. This thing happened. So if there's a calculation, etc. Arrange and act provides readability and flexibility. I like this writing style. Nice. But again, this is just an evolved version, right? This is my looking at how to write unit tests for years and struggling with the structure of them and then deciding I'm just going to do that. Yeah. I do stuff in my arrange to make it more concise. Yeah. But again, in this code base, if you were to work in this code base with me, we'd have the discussion about how to do this effectively, and we'd come to an agreement about how to do it effectively for us, right? That's always my point, right? It doesn't matter if you are, like, if you were coming onto this project a year from now, let's say, this project takes off and I'm able to hire developers and I can say, hey, come and work with me, right? You're going to work in this structure, right? If you like it, that's great. If you don't, you have input to say, hey, we could do some things differently here. And that's kind of my point, is that it's not closing my mind to saying, hey, we can change things. You have to be realistic in what you can change and when you can change it. This will be a point of contention for most devs because you've done something unique. Unique to what? Unique to me, right? Unique to because someone else in a book that wrote a book on unit testing says it should be written one way, right? Again, I've worked with a lot of different devs, and everyone has different expectations of what unit test should be, right? So there is no general standard, and that's what I'm saying, right? I don't want to just keep trying to implement what other people tell me I should be implement. Yeah. I'm not. I don't believe you're saying it's wrong at all. I know it's a discussion, and I'm not trying to. I don't want to be defensive over it. I'm just saying that my reality is, if you were to come and work with me on this, right, and you said, hey, I don't like this testing style, we could have that discussion, because it's more important that you and I work together on a piece of software and understand how it works and are comfortable with how to change it than it is to just go forward with it because it works, it's fine, just move on, right? Because if you're working in a code base that you can't change, that you can't adapt, that you can't build, you're gonna cut around corners. You're going to try and make workarounds. It's our human nature to do the things we want regardless, right? So it's why I always believe that developers should take ownership of the day-to-day architecture. Now, I used to say that developers should take ownership of the architecture. I disagree with myself on that one, 100%. And that's just in 2 years I've changed that opinion. A lot of developers are not capable, and I apologize if it's insulting. A lot of developers are not capable of looking at a system as a system. They want to get their job done, right? So I think that developers should take ownership of those pieces. This feels painful. How does it feel painful? And the people who are more comfortable with the actual changing of the software should say, how do we change that? And that's why I'm saying that I don't want to follow someone's patterns. I don't want to say, I'm going to do event sourcing. It's why I never say, I'm writing a REST API, right? I'm not. I'm writing an API. It's pragmatic. It is a thing. It works. If it fits to someone's expectation of what software should be, win. It works straight out of the box. But in general, I would bet that I could take any developer and get them up and running and writing code in this application stack within a day, right? If they were comfortable with .NET development. Right? If they're a brand new developer, okay, it might take a little longer. There's a few concepts in there, but they don't need to know everything about the stack to work within the stack. And over time, they would evolve their understanding and evolve their comfort level with it. And when we hit something painful, we'd fix it together. Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm going for, right? Unless it's, I'm not saying it's wrong for that reason or even wrong at all, right? I'd be like, I don't like this, either convince me or we change it. Right. And that's what I'm saying. I'm willing to do that sort of stuff, right? And I think every development team should be willing to accept this doesn't work, right? Don't stick with it just because it does a job. Right. And that's why if a lot of developers read books and watch videos, they then try and implement, right, what they've understood or what they've taken from that book, that video. But as we've witnessed, just looking at Kafka stuff, there's not a lot of specificity. There's some blurred lines to the point where you don't quite know if you're doing it right? And there's videos out there saying, nope, they're doing it wrong. How do you know you're doing it right then? Right? And that's why I'm not going to stress. I'm not going to panic myself into trying to adhere to someone's expectation of what the software stack should look like. If I'm learning a concept, I only implement it on side projects. And that's a reasonable way to do it, right? Get yourself comfortable with the patterns, understand your challenges with it, understand that. And I mean, I do have that opportunity right now, right? This is not a actual project, but I'm treating it like I would make it a product. And if it turns into a product, that's great, right? But again, as a developer, you should be able to change what you work with day to day, right? I think you should be permitted to say, this does not solve this problem. Here's why we're going to work around it, and here's how we're going to fix it in the long term, right? Everyone should have a say in that. But not every developer is confident in doing that. And that's why lunch and learns are useful. That's why being able to discuss with other team members. This is why streaming is great for me, because I get to talk to smart people like yourself and Esa and Kani and Mr. Anhorn, who, if you've not visited Mr. Anhorn's stream, he does some incredible stuff on all sorts of stuff, right? But yeah, and you should have that flexibility. So again, this testing style is just my evolution, right? That this is my evolution. This fits for me. I've worked this way with other development teams, and they adopted it, right? Thing in your Discord, his stream time is hard for me to make. Yeah, sadly. Your statements are ignoring that software runs on infrastructure. Hi, Consulted. How you doing? My statements are ignoring that software runs on infrastructure. Infra has specifications. I'm just waiting for the actual. I want to make sure that I'm not just talking and assuming. The test pattern, I think I like it more than the default, but less than mine. That's absolutely perfect, right? That would give us something to discuss, because you have an expectation. You have to write using architecture that is infrastructure specific. You have to write using architecture that is infrastructure specific. Morning, Apex. How you doing? Not sure. I mean, so if I'm doing cloud deployment. That's okay. That's why we're waiting. Using pass, you have to use pass architecture patterns. To some extent. But I'm not saying that I'm not. There's still patterns within there that are common no matter what, right? You can still write software that fits. Just because you change the shape of the application, the actual, okay, I'm not using lots of microservices. I'm using more monolithic applications, or I'm using this storage mechanism, or I'm using whatever. Doesn't mean that the general practices within the code, the actual architecture of the code. So the actual deployment architecture, yeah, you have to take concerns with, and that's why I'm saying that as a developer, I used to believe that the team took ownership of everything. But now, having reflected back on that and seen what happens given the chance for a team to do that, teams don't want to do that, right? They don't want to take ownership of the software. In general, they don't, because they're scared of making a mistake. They're scared of getting it wrong. They're scared of this and that or whatever. And they have opinions, but they're not comfortable sharing them, right? So giving them more control over the day-to-day, like we do this when this happens, we do this when this happens. Giving them control over those pieces allows more comfort within the code itself. The overall architecture of the system, whether we distribute different services, whether we do, however we build the software overall, I don't think that is really where I am. So there are certain patterns that fit better with different, but again, there's no, in my experience, dev become too detached from the metal. I mean, that's what virtualization is, right? Virtualization is the ability to disconnect from the metal, because you're not, like, if I have to deploy to an IIS server and I have to deploy one website and all the services, and now I've got a problem with loading up that server. So now I need multiple IIS servers. So now my cost changes, right? Yeah, I get that your application should be architected slightly differently. But I don't, from my original point is kind of like to that, right? You developers don't want that level of responsibility. So the overall architecture becomes the responsibility of um, the architects, the higher level team members, and then the actual day-to-day is the realm of the software developers. So they're not dealing with, are we using microservices, are we doing eventing, etc. They're dealing with, how do we do eventing, what tools do we need, why doesn't this work, what get-arounds are we using, right? Those things that should be concentrated on the team level, and those things don't affect the overall architecture, they just affect the flow within that greater architecture. I feel. You have to create a culture that allows people to fail. Most frequently seen in development PR is basically, does our code work? Yeah, you have to create a culture that allows people to fail without fear. Blameless postmortems can help with that. Yeah, postmortems again in general create dread. I get that you have to understand why you failed and why you have an issue. But the biggest thing should be identify the holes and how do we fix the holes? And it's normally that becomes, we need a checklist. We don't need a checklist. I mean, we have a lot of testing, etc., but we still get bugs in prod. You don't design architecture-based infrastructure, it is a part that can be inserted into the system like an infrastructure logo, like a port adapter. One day your system runs on Azure, the other day on AWS, the other day on your local system. But again, if you're dealing with specifics of those platforms, yeah, you have to deal with specifics where necessary. Our retros are really good, Apex. Pass info is made to be used with specific architecture based on cloud service provider market research. Yeah, and I'll be quite honest, I do not have a great deal of experience in cloud, right? It's not where most of my experience has been on-prem deployments. Only recently did I actually start using any real cloud services, but again, not using Azure or AWS for primary deployment, more using EC2 storage and things like that. So they become abstractions in the system, right? They don't become a fundamental component. Building it based upon a cloud infrastructure, building it based upon a platform's actual tooling, right? So Azure clearly has a lot of stuff built into it that would affect how you do it. But again, I still think those things can be abstracted, and you can use the architectural patterns you feel work if they fit well within that. But I think my problem is when someone tells me how to do it, but can't show me how to do it without $20,000-$30,000 in consultancy fees. Most developers are going to do it themselves anyway, and they're going to come up with a bad solution. So what I'm saying is, make solutions that can be adapted quicker, write code that is less involved from the start, and build the involvement in there. To the point where I might bring up next retro, are you in AWS? Understand these statements more in context, and maybe using lambdas to make an API or something. Agree with S's comment. In pass, metal equals runtime, or CLI and C#. Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by specific architecture. Like, I'm not quite sure that I'm not overlapping on my thought here in terms of That's not. I mean, Consorted has been around here for 4 years. A follower for 4 years. So Consorted's been here, knows what the chat is. It's not challenged that part. I think it's just it's a understanding opinion, right? And understanding what we mean by specific architecture. I don't want to be. I appreciate the interaction. I appreciate the ability to talk. So there's an assumption as well. I just want to make sure that, like, I'm not just, because again, my experience has not been a lot of cloud stuff. So I'm more than happy to understand the approach of someone who has done that. In specific architecture piece isn't defined enough for me to understand. Try and challenge you with that question. Yeah. I think you're talking about the difference in business logic layer versus other adapter layers. And I suppose, yeah, because most developers are going to be in those business logic pieces for the most part, right? And that's where this work is, right? But again, when I'm saying architecture, right, the overall layout of the application, right? How does it get data? How does it, how do you get from the front to the back end, right? But again, onion architecture, hexagonal architecture, clean architecture, these are labels that people put on things, and then you go out there and you see, here's an onion architecture, and you see slight variations in how they've done it, because they've done exactly what I'm doing anyway, is they're building an architecture based upon their understanding of what that book said or this book said. I'm just saying, I'm not going spending vast amounts of time looking at what other people tell me I should do, right? If I land on the solution, then it was a logical solution in the first place, right? And yes, I have studied different things, so my influences will be clear. And yeah, we have onion architecture that we want to rewrite because we have a better understanding of the architecture than those who built it, because you've got hindsight, because you've got the experience. And that's what I'm saying with domain-driven design. I'm not going to tackle this as a DDD project. A year from now, 2 years from now, when I understand the domain in greater complexity, then yeah, maybe I do come back and say, okay, we can DDD this, right? Because I'll have that hindsight, I'll have that business knowledge, right? And that's the overall point. The overall point was, do not be afraid to change things for fear of breaking something. If you're scared of your system, don't be afraid to suggest change, but it should be a team effort. It should not be an individual's effort to do it. So yeah, Consorted, I appreciate, I'm not dismissing the greater architecture, the whole deployment aspect of this, right? You know, I'm building this in a bubble, right? But I'm building this in a way I know I can deploy, right? At the very least, I know I can deploy this on Kubernetes. I've done this sort of stuff. Personally, I've been tinkering with this for the last couple of years, right? So I do know that this will deploy as an application stack, and it will function. Scale-wise, I'm confident in the scaling choices, but again, those are decisions that shouldn't necessarily be those of the development team. Those should be tools that are placed in there, and the development team shouldn't have to concern themselves with them. There are patterns and things that we can use that definitely will enable integration with bigger systems. Mostly, I grew up some standard theory, though, is where general code improvements come from. Yeah. But the ability to look back and see the patterns, to see the code changes, to see that the experience go in there, to see those growths is necessary. And you can't. A lot of code bases stagnate because people are scared to change them. Nice. Scale is important. Yeah, scale is important. It's absolutely. Like, it's funny. I was reading a few job listings yesterday, and you know, a lot of them, I'm comfortable with everything except the building cloud platforms at scale. Right. I know I could probably do it, but I've never done it, so I'm not going to go for a job that requires. Because when they say that, if you read between the lines on those things, especially when they have will join the on-call roster. Nope. You can look at code and say, this is where we fell flat, but you can also learn a concept and inject it into a code base. What does that scale mean? Well, it's kind of, yeah. I mean, in that respect, I mean, being able to deploy multiple services, being able to deploy to accommodate growing number of users, shrinking number of users, right? But the fact that they then had will join the on-call, it was very senior level architectural position, and it said we'll join the on-call roster with the other developers. Like, nope, because that means that scale is very fragile already, and yeah, you don't have a DevOps infrastructure in place to handle that, so your developers are doing the actual thing. And that was for a large organization, a very big one. I will never do on-call ever again. Well, I say that as I'm trying to build an application that I would hope to make an application that is actually published, which means I will do on-call again. So I'm a liar, because if this is my, I don't like the term. I'm not going to use the term. This is my legacy. We'll go with that, right? Then I'm going to be on call, right? Because I have no choice. I'm the leader, right? The new manager actually asked who does ops because he couldn't tell. Handles the, yeah. So yeah, I think that the developers going back on this, and I do apologize for anyone. I mean, people have stuck around for this conversation, so I hope people are engaged enough. You know, this is the sort of stuff I do like discussing. So getting stuff done on the stream is kind of a secondary thing if conversation and intelligent conversation can happen, where we can take our opinions and our experiences and share them. That's exactly what I want to do. If you are interested, there is a Discord, and you know, we do this sort of thing. And you know, the greater that community grows, the more people there are to talk to. Yeah, and I just realized my window. Oh, I have a window for YouTube up. I just realized it's minimized, and Amal is not able to join the Twitch, so I gotta be good at that. Lol, I wonder if that's the source of our fear. We have users, when we get complaints, no one is happy. No one's ever happy to receive a complaint, right? You don't want a complaint. But let's do this. I think Apex. I think it was Apex that said it. An environment of you have to create a culture that allows people to fail without fear. That's a very true statement, right? It's not. You shouldn't create a culture of laziness. You shouldn't create a culture of nonchalance, I think is the best word I can think of there. But what you can do is encourage your developers to know that if they make a failure, there's no ramifications for making a failure if you are clear, honest, and you learn from it, right? It was really important for us. We're going to make mistakes. People are going to be unhappy. You're going to learn and fix. If it's not people who fail, it's processes that failed people generally. Yeah. And that's why, again, I think that some level of ownership should be extended to the developers. Because the developers should feel that the code they're writing, they have a personal interaction with. Not responsibility to the point of, hey, I expect you to work 20 hours a day, right? You should have 8 hours of work and then, or not even 8 hours of work. I honestly think 6 hours is good enough with some availability, you know, and a couple of days a week, right? You can get a lot done in that couple of days. But Right, you get that 8 hours of work, but you get it. Yeah. You need, and developers need structure, and they need direction, and they need deadlines of some form, because otherwise people get lazy. And unfortunately, that's when you find the laziest people, is when you remove all deadlines. So you need some level of expectation set. But again, encouraging a more team-based environment, encouraging the team to kind of pep other people up and pick them up. And if there's someone that's particularly slow, making sure they're pairing more. Yep, no worries, Apex. Making sure they're pairing more, making sure that they're brought along and they feel an ownership of that code will help. Won't fix everything. You're going to get people who don't want to do the job right. Path to test adapters. Let's see. Ads. Thank you, Dota. Thank you, Rigden, for the conversation. I really appreciate it. Fun as always. Have a great day at work. Don't forget, tomorrow it'll be coding challenge time. So test, does that mean that's not adapters? What does it mean by test adapter path? That's not the test folder. Forces the console process to use custom test adapters from a specified path. Nope. Can I do test slash no build it builds the source, but it won't run the tests. I kind of want, I need it to narrow. Oh no, hold on, it is going into tests. This is a most frustrating path. Make sure that test, discover, and executors are registered and platform and framework version settings are appropriate, and try again. Not what I wanted to be spending the entire stream on, but we'll get there. Yeah, I don't care about that. In-unit test adapter. Add NuGet package. Specifying XUnit test adapter from command line .NET test. .NET test. Yeah, well, that doesn't work, does it? That's not running because that's what it's complaining about with the. There's no mention of adapter in there. Unit testing solution .NET new .NET UX unit .NET create a test. This just shows .NET test. I'm going to cry. Doesn't show that at all. I don't want code coverage right now. Code coverage is a whole different challenge that we'll have to come across. problem is I'm not in the Visual Studio Runner, right? I'm not trying to do that part. Unit. So the thing there is specifying the N unit test adapter. X unit, add new get package, X unit run a Visual Studio. Yeah, just saying that several of the samples are showing code coverage, and that is something that we will get to eventually. Again, I'm trying to. Code coverage isn't necessarily bad. So I'm not struggling with running unit tests. I'm struggling with running unit tests from a command line, right? So tomorrow will be a bit of a different stream. So I agreed to take on a coding challenge. So if you go into the Discord, there's a coding challenges section, and I've put a poll in there of the 3 coding challenges that I felt would be achievable, or would at least be easy to analyze, and were outside of my current skill set. And the goal will be tomorrow to stream a little bit longer because I've got the day off and go through them. So if you haven't and you want to, please go and register your vote on the poll. Right now it's looking like I'll be doing something to do with caching. The other side is pushing it. They are cheating on their coverage. I'm not sure they always totally realize it. And that's, again, you've got to keep teams honest, right? Teams have to keep teams honest. You have to make sure that you are really representing the team as they should be, and not. I wonder if this is a problem with packages more than anything else. Got an SDK? No, it's not. When he brought it up, I talked about a certless test. He did not like that, but that was the real water. Yeah, if you're cutting the corners, then yeah. So we know that running the unit tests across the entire project will show failures, right? And it's showing them in the right area, right? I don't want to fix these unit tests, right? Because I want this to break when I publish it, and that's kind of the entire purpose of what I'm doing. I'm trying to get these to run as part of my CI workflow in GitHub, so that going forward, I have validation and I can't make a PR, because I was about to. I was about to make a PR because I believed I'd verified everything yesterday post stream, and everything was working. So, yeah. So so I'm obviously getting the same issues running it from the command line, right? I need to open GitHub desktop. So this is the problem, right? This is what GitHub is throwing out, right? Make sure that the test discoverer and executors are registered in platform and framework versions. It is going into the tests, though. Additionally, path to test adapters can be specified. But if I look at running X unit tests from a command line, run unit tests from .NET test, I did not open everything I thought it would do. Like, it's doing this anyway, right? It's not like it's doing. Right, it's filtering the tests. That's not what I need to do. because it's actually finding the ones there. Make sure that test just proves that I just don't often do this from a command line, right? I'm trying to do things better, right? I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing something better than I have done in the past. Add the test adapter. Is that the secret? XUnit. Adapter? No. There is no... What adapter do I use? There is no adapter for XUnit. XUnit runner console MS Build Visual Studio. Let's try that one. So if this works, we should see unit test run, right? And then we just add them in, and then we just need to know to do them next time. No, I think that's about the same exact error. Again, that's VS. We're not using MS Build, we're not using console. Packages for writing tests, packages for running tests, packages for developers extending. Retired packages. XUnit execution. This package contains the execution for all support systems to be. No. I'm not extending it. It's not extensibility here. This is not something I'm trying to do. Supports .NET Framework 4.52 plus. Large repository. Oh. So I do apologize for this, but it's kind of necessary to get this moving, right? So the other option would be the Visual Studio Runner, but I don't think that's actually going to be any better. Ooh, run.linkpad. Interesting. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding these packages in to see if actually I didn't do something. I should have done that because there's no build on this, so it's taking what was there. So let's try again. Nope. Actually, hold on. That did it. So which one did it now? Let's leave the console runner in there. Assume that the console is the one. Right. So the tooling is allowing me to run the test anyway. So this tooling lets me run it, but running it from the command line is my true test. The reason I've got to build it first is because I've got no build on the test. It assumes that it's running from the built output. So now the error's back. So it was the Visual Studio Runner. So let's add in. I don't like that because it's something I can forget. So what will happen is the first time I write a test package, I'm going to just add Visual Studio to this one to verify. And to this one. Might as well add it to both and see what happens. the first time I write a test package, I'm going to leave that out, push the code, see the error, then go and fix it and push the code with an explicit commit of, yep, forgot to install XUnit runner Visual Studio again. Okay. There you go. 5 failed, 18 passed, 19 passed in tenant management, 6 passed in team test. So we do have some code there. Okay, so let's push that. Did I remove the one I didn't want there? No. The console runner is clearly not it. Now, what will be interesting is if I push this and it still fails, because it means that the console runner might be the one that I need to do there. Added xunit.visual.runner studio to allow command line execution of unit tests. So it does mean that I'll regularly do a push, see a fail, then have to do another push of a minor fix that will be very obvious from memory. And it's just a little bit. So what I might do there is document that as a workflow for creating unit tests. But I don't know about you, but I'm not very big at saying, hey, I'm going to do something new in code. I'm going to open the checklist and follow the checklist in detail. I'm very bad at notes. So anyone new to the chat, if you are joining, if you are interested in what I'm doing, if you want to ask any questions about what I'm doing, if you think I'm doing something wrong, right? I have no problem in trying to answer that. I hope I do not come across as defensive in any way. I do reserve the right to not change what I'm doing. But I do appreciate people's different perspectives on software development, and I do want to make sure I take them into account. I'd love to learn more, right? We all have different experiences, and that's kind of what I want to do. So the Discord is a place where if you want to share stuff, sorry, I keep hitting the mic with my glasses because I'm waiting for that. The Discord is where I want to share, future projects, successes, failures. And it's why I do it on the stream, right? I do this on the stream not to say, hey, I know better than anybody else. It's to say, I'm just developing software and this is how I do it. And if it resonates with people, then great. These are the struggles. So feel free to join if you are interested. Discord link is there. And this project overall is kind of closed source, but I am open sourcing some pieces of it and sharing pieces, branching pieces off, such as the Kafka pieces I've written. That is a set of extensions just to help with the day-to-day publishing of the Kafka pieces. It's not perfect, but it is there for other people to share. So, love the stream. TDD is so important. It is, and I want to get better at it. I want to get better at actually doing the TDD part, right? I appreciate the conversation today, Consulted. It's really great to have the interaction. I looked at your name when you first came in and said that, and yeah, you've been following since 2019, so. Thank you for that. So I don't like the way it lists them, but it does indicate failed tests, right? So I now have a genuine it failed because the test failed. And this is an important step. I didn't want to spend all stream doing this. I wanted to do more stuff, but this is a really important step for me to have, and it was an opportune moment because I had bad tests. But now with that in place, once this gets merged into the main branch, etc., and distilled through the other things, then this will improve for everybody, right? Or for every subsequent push. I say everybody there because, again, in a regular workflow, right, in a business workflow, putting these sorts of things in can save time. So let's have a look at what I'm actually failing on, right? So this will be something simple from the refactor yesterday. So for those that weren't around yesterday we switched out Couchbase for SQL Server. Took 2 hours, got it done. All the code now works except this unit test. Object reference. So the result is null. Yeah. So the problem here is my range. I have not set up what happens when I update the ticket, right? I said, hey, when I query to get the ticket, here's what it returns, right? So with the original data. Now ticket repository dot when repository dot update async arg dot is any ticket. I'm going to capture whichever ticket, and the last one in would win. So if this was wrong, you know, again, I've got to any cancellation token doesn't matter. Do. So what this says is, okay, when this actual method is invoked, do this, and that captures the result from the argument, right? So it knows that that's being passed in from the arguments, and it'll pull that out. So welcome back, Apex. So this is nsubstitute is a great mocking library. I'd not used it because it, in general, in .NET, if a library has been ported from Java, they put N in front of it, right? That's the general rule, right? So I've kind of tended to avoid those libraries in the past because they come with the opinions of how Java development happens, and oftentimes they're not direct ports, so that the styling is odd in some places or doesn't fit right. Maybe incorrectly, maybe I've judged based upon a few libraries that have done that and just kind of tended to stay clear. But with the problems that mock, or mock-Q, however you pronounce it, introduced and then reverted, I believe, with the whole monitoring and ad revenue ideas of the library, to try, and rightly so, try and make some money off what is a massive project. I decided I would stay clear of mock. So I picked up nsubstitute. And now I'm thinking, why wasn't I on this sooner? Because it ends up, you don't have to say, like with mock, you have to say .object right there. So you end up with all this code. But this way, with nsubstitute, you can be really clear, right? I'm passing the ticket repository around. To everything else, it looks like a ticket repository. It just happens to be a mock instance of the ticket repository. So I kind of like the style. So this should now run. There you go. So when the ticket is updated, customer name has changed, data. And this was necessary. I had to have this working because there's other things that I need to talk about here. So we're gonna unfortunately have to finish up the stream shortly. But again, if you haven't voted, and I'm gonna push it again. Tomorrow I will be doing a coding challenge. I will not be doing platform work. You're more than welcome to join the Discord. There is a link in the tabs below as well. My GitHub is there as well, and the YouTube. If you want to go and vote, you can vote on what I do tomorrow, which will be a challenge that I have not pre-prepared for. I'm going to take a look at the challenge document, file new project, and in that stream, I'm going to do as much of that challenge as I can. And I am going to then share that code on the GitHub repo, or on an appropriate GitHub repository, so that people can see how I tackled some things and whatnot. And then I will probably make that a stream reward, or a points reward challenge from then on, behind a pretty high points thing. Which is a little unfair to the people watching on YouTube. I do apologize. I do stream on YouTube and on Twitch at the same time. YouTube, you get the benefit of slightly better quality sometimes. Yeah, interaction with both chats is not possible. So it's not like I can put those sorts of things into the YouTube process right now. But I would make it an available thing in the future if it's of interest. So go and join. Okay, so let's commit that change. Needed to capture the result when updating the ticket. We push that, and the net result should be we see a success in here, which means that this branch is in a good place. We'll just give that some time. There we go. So if there's anything on the stream, and I think I made this off to Apex yesterday, if there's ever anything on the stream that you want me to spend a little bit more time on, if there's something you would like to ask questions about, doesn't matter if it's like, you know, it looks intimidating, or it's way more code than you can possibly grasp. If there's something you want to focus on, I'm more than happy to do it and to try and look through these things. And, you know, I'm never closed to the fact that I might learn something along the way. Oftentimes by trying to teach someone something or, you know, demonstrate something to someone, you often have to review your own understanding. And it's why pairing is actually a very useful tool. When you're trying to tell someone how to write a piece of code, your brain has to slow down enough to question whether that's what you need to be telling them. So if you're like me, or like most developers I've met, right, it's really easy to just throw out code, right? Especially when you're when the idea is flowing, you're just tinker. You're just writing code, and it flows. And when it does that, it feels really good, right? But oftentimes you've not stopped to check your assumptions. You've not stopped to check, is the code actually doing what it needs to do? And you go back over it, right? So pairing is a very useful mechanism for slowing that down and stopping yourself from going ahead. And in the pairing, as far as test-driven development goes, is very useful to have someone looking over your shoulder and saying, well, is that what we're testing? Are we testing too much? Are we doing too much? Right? So there we go. We have a green, a legitimate green. And I just so I will share before I finish today. I do have a few ideas for channel point redemptions. I do have a few ideas for interactions with the stream. At the beginning of the stream, I was kind of saying what I'm going to do is work on some bot stuff. Probably not on stream for the most part. But I think I'm going to make it so that you as viewers can backlog items for me, right? And actually create a system where it will actually create a backlog item. So if you feel that I need to go off and do something, you can create a backlog ticket item and they'll pop up on the screen. So I'm going to kind of work on that in spare time. The spare time, yeah. So it's kind of a little bit more interaction with the stream, a little bit more fun, but also a practical use of demonstrating, hey, I'm working on a ticket system. So again, for those of you that aren't normally in here, I am building an Agile project management tool. My goal is to try and tackle some of the challenges that I have with other software, mainly about visibility and visuals of where work is and who owns work and all those things. So I do have some strong opinions on how to do that. And I'll be developing this over the course of several years. But I do want to put things like channel point redemptions in. I do want to put interactions with the stream in. It is something that I feel helps with the overall community feel. I've done a lot of watching of other streams, and you know, if you're sitting watching me code all the time and you're finding that productive and you're finding that useful, that's fine. If you want to ask questions, if you want to interact, that's fine too. I have no issue. If you want to tell me I'm doing everything wrong and I'm terrible, I might take it a little personally, right? Because I just want to grow. Right? But yeah, that is why I stream. So those things are coming up. I will stop waffling. No, I appreciate that. And again, if you don't agree, that's also fine. I would love to know your opinion. So, and I appreciate your support. I appreciate everything you've brought to this community so far. It is an astounding amount of contribution, and I truly appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone that is helping me stay focused on this. Right, getting back into streaming is scary, right? Because I fell out of it because it felt like I was not doing anything productive for anybody else but me. So yeah. But anyway, enough waffling. My apologies. It is time to finish up the stream. We are going to go over to Apex because that is where I will be heading anyway. Apex is a newer game developer. He's trying to build an actual platform to build his game upon. So he's doing a lot of what I'm doing. So it resonates. He is using C# and he's using Godot. It is game development, but he also wants to learn things like how to do unit testing in Godot and stuff. So game development is a different discipline entirely, I feel, but one worthwhile. So let's go right over there. Thank you again for joining me. I will be back tomorrow. We'll do the challenge tomorrow, and it's looking like right now I'm going to be doing a caching thing. So we'll see where we head. Thank you as always, everyone. Appreciate it. And